I'm calling to order the joint City Council, HRA, and Planning Commission work session. It's a virtual meeting via WebEx. It's April 19th, 2021, and it's 6 p.m. So I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Stark, since this is the night of an HRA meeting, and you can take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. Tonight we're here both with a specific request and then some larger questions about what we refer to as the city garage site, which is at 77th between Pleasant and Pillsbury on the south side of 77th Street. And as the name implies, it was the former site of our city garage, or at least a part of it. That facility was removed in the early 2000s when the new public works maintenance facility was built. On the north half of the property is the Havenwood senior living community. The south portion of the property, however, has remained undeveloped, and it has been utilized on a temporary basis by Richfield Bloomington Honda for some time. Richfield Bloomington Honda and Tim Carter, its general manager, is here, has proposed a permanent use of the site. So we wanted to give Mr. Carter a few minutes to talk to you about his proposal, and then we can come back and talk a little bit about some of the city standards and requirements that pertain to the site. So with that, if I don't know if Melissa can share her screen to show the site plan, hopefully, and then I would ask Mr. Carter to identify himself and just give his proposal.
Director Stark, just 1 second. I'm going to have to send the presentation to Latanya to share. It is not working from my computer, so it'll just take a minute to get that site plan up.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Carter could go ahead and start giving his introductory information while we get that rolling. So Tim, you can take it away.
Thank you, Council and HRA and staff. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And John and I and Melissa and various people have been talking about this for quite a long time. And I'm very clear on the obstacles that are in the way of getting this approved. But I just want to make it official, I guess, to record and have official discussion on my possibility of purchasing that site for long-term use as employee parking. I've been at this site since 1986. I've been a good partner with the city. I love this city. I just think it's the best place to be in town and love doing business with my partners. This strategically is important to me because pre-pandemic, I was up to nearly 200 people, 197 employees, and it was more than what my site could have. There's a lot of discussion on the original development commitments that were not followed through on, i.e. a ramp on my own site, and has to do with taxes and a lot of other, I think it's kind of a side discussion to go on, but the purpose of this discussion tonight is to buy that land for employee parking for when normal business does resume and more normal employee levels return. Competitive edge that I have, I would like to keep as a dealer is to being able to have my employees walk to work. And when I get to a point where I have to find alternative parking for my employees, it gets to be far, far away and not convenient. And then I have to buy extra vans to bring these people in, and I'd be one of the only dealers in town that would have to be faced with that. And it's really important. It seems so small, but it's very important from a dealer competitive edge standpoint to keep your employees very close. I'd like to pay cash for it. I'm not looking for tax handout for TIF. I'd like to pay fair market value for what it would be today. And I'm prepared to hear the discussion of any possibilities of making that happen.
Well, first of all, welcome and thank you for presenting that. Do we want to look at the site plan now, or is there more information that you'd like to share?
Yeah, hopefully we've worked through some of our technical issues. I'm not sure if Latanya is able to show the PowerPoint or share that.
Okay, sorry, I am working on that now with this new, sorry, that's not it.
Yeah, so for those of you that aren't aware, we are working through a new WebEx kind of platform that's different than what we had been using in the past. And with any new technology, there are prone to be hiccups, so I apologize for that.
No apology necessary. I know what you're going through from my standpoint.
There we go.
We can see it now. It's just not expanded, but at least we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just want to go to the presentation view, it's that little, looks like a roll down poster board. There we go.
And just page down one page, and it'll be perfect.
Okay. Tim, is there anything you wanted to say specifically about the site plan?
Yeah, that is a very elementary picture. A few weeks ago, we went through a sketch plan review and got some really good feedback as to if all the obstacles were overcome and I did get a chance to buy this, then what would I have to do to meet your current guidelines? And it would be I'll have if it does get to that point, I'll put in the money to make that to meet all the requirements that you want to have as far as lighting, green space, number of parking spaces, traffic flow, pedestrian flow, drainage, pervious surfaces, that type of thing. I'll meet everything that is required of me to make that go. So that picture you're looking at basically is 77th Street east-west on top. And then we normally now currently turn in where the original driveways were for the South City Garage. That's where your offices were before for the city garage. And on the east side, on the bottom, is kind of half covered by trees in this picture, but there's an exit and entry ramp on that as well. So that's kind of how I would vision it would look, but until we get done with putting all the requirements together, it may look a little different, much more professional, of course, but.
All right, thanks. And LaShawn, if you can go to the next slide, maybe Melissa can talk a little bit about the some of the background for the site.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the site's guided now, what it's zoned, and kind of what all those obstacles that Tim is mentioning are, because those would be the first consideration before we started talking about the specifics. So though we did go over them with Tim, we want to talk to you about the larger policy changes before we kind of get into that nitty-gritty detail. So 7700 Pillsbury is currently guided for medium density housing, which is the orange color on this map. It's been guided that way since 1997, when the city first started talking about relocating and reconstructing the Public Works garage. So while there's commercial on, which is pink and red on this map, on the west side of the railroad tracks, generally this side has remained designated for residential development, which is brown, and mixed use, which is the purple color. And then the zoning of this property matches that designation and also calls for housing here. Latanya, can you move to the next slide? As Tim mentioned, this is the site of the former city garage offices. When the site was, or when the new Public Works building was constructed, the site was transferred from the city to the HRA for redevelopment. The building was demolished in 2014, and the HRA has worked with a couple of different housing developers who have been interested in the site. I think, John, maybe we'll touch on those a little bit more. In the meantime, the city has approved a couple of interim use permits to temporarily allow Honda to let their employees park here. And as Tim also alluded to, the original Honda approvals called for the construction of a parking ramp in the south east quadrant of his campus to start. The construction of that was to start by 2020. The parking ramp could accommodate, as it was proposed, would be able to accommodate the number of employees that currently park on this site. In addition to the fact that the current guiding of the property calls for residential development, there isn't any zoning district right now that allows standalone parking lots as a principal use of a property. So there are several reasons for this, but primarily it's because there's just a general lack of developable land in Richfield, and use of that land for parking has not been seen as terribly efficient or as something that added a lot of value to the community. So, you know, over the years, we've received a lot of calls from rental car businesses and parking lot operators because of our proximity to the airport. And they've wanted to use several properties in the community for that type of use. And generally, we've been able to, or exclusively, we've been able to decline those based on the current ordinance. LaTanya, if you could go to the next one. So if the policymakers want to move forward with consideration of this proposal, this is just a summary of the actions that will be necessary. There would have to be a comprehensive plan change, and it doesn't really make sense to look at this parcel in isolation. If you remember, on that map, the east side of the railroad tracks is housing. We'd probably need to look at all of those properties. And if we're going to move toward commercial on this site, maybe we need to look at moving some of those other properties to commercial as well. And just a procedural reminder that does require a supermajority of the council to change the comprehensive plan. There'd also have to be some zoning changes, right? Like I said, no district allows parking as a principal use. So we'd need to study that and determine where you would want to allow those, because it couldn't just be this site. It would have to be in a district. And then those regulations would apply across the community. After that, we'd likely have to rezone this property and perhaps again, others nearby. The HRA would have to consider the sale, have to work to get an appraisal and decide on the sale. John, again, might touch on that a little bit more. And then also we need to consider the approvals for that current Honda campus that required the parking ramp to be constructed on site. Now, the reason that was required was because as it's built right now, the development does not meet the zoning regulations, which call for very intense development here along the freeway. So right now the property is non-compliant. Policymakers should think about whether or not there's a desire to modify those approvals in general or for the standards along 494. If we're going to allow parking as a primary use, then perhaps those requirements were requiring intensity here along 494. Maybe those don't make so much sense. And one more slide. So I'm going to put these questions up here. These are things that we'd like you to think about tonight, but I think John is going to give you a little bit more of staff's perspective on this before we open the discussion.
Yep. Thank you, Melissa. Just again, by way of background, we have had some development interest in this site. Both formal proposals we've received have been housing. The first one was in the fall of 2017 from a development team called Nikolai Apartments, and they had proposed 21 market rate apartments, and the HRA entered into a letter of intent to sell the property to them. Ultimately, they were not able to make the numbers work. And I can understand why 21 units really may not offer the critical mass that somebody would need. I think that was the kind of fatal flaw in that proposal, was it was a little too small. Then in 2019, the HRA and the 2019 proposal came to a work session of the City Council and HRA both, I believe. And that was from an entity called MWF Properties. And they're proposing 55 units of workforce rental housing. So affordable housing, not necessarily deeply affordable, but affordable nonetheless. At that point in time, the land appraised at 770,000. And the applicants, MWF, they were seeking federal tax credits. They're a nonprofit developer, I believe, or at least they are a nonprofit developer. And they were seeking federal tax credits to make the project feasible for them financially. They were not awarded the federal tax credits. A very competitive process, and only the minority of applicants get funded in that. So they have kind of put their proposal on hold with us. We've spoken with them. They say they are still interested, and they're hoping for some changes to the scoring system to tax credits. There's also talk of the state of Minnesota instituting its own tax credit program that's separate from the federal tax credit. And so, if the property were available in the future, I think that they would be interested in returning and making a proposal. I've also received interest in the site from a business that could potentially be displaced at Portland and 494 when those ramps change and when the freeway changes. They were not ready at this point in time to submit a proposal. But again, I just wanted to make you aware of kind of the interest in the development in the past. I'm just going to reiterate maybe one or two things that Melissa had said. One is the comprehensive plan change to this property would require a supermajority. So it would require 4 out of 5 city council people. Most decisions that you make are a simple majority. One of the very few exceptions, the only one I know of actually, to that rule is with comprehensive plan changes that are from housing to a different use. State statutes state that that must be a supermajority or 4/5 vote. And just to make my intentions clear on the value of the property, I do believe that the highest and best use of this property is for housing. And typically in an appraisal, the appraiser has a number of ways that they can value this property. They could value it as the proposed use, which in Mr. Carter's case would be the surface parking, or they could choose the quote unquote highest and best use. And I would expect that the appraisal would be for the highest and best use for this. And again, in 2018 or 2019, I can't remember the exact date that the appraisal was done, that was 770,000. With the, we've had a tremendous interest in the housing market in Richfield, both multifamily and single family. And I would suspect that that number will have gone up fairly significantly since that time. Staff, and this is something we've shared with Mr. Carter. Staff is not enthusiastic about, well, maybe I can put it more bluntly. Staff would not recommend changing our zoning ordinance to allow parking as a standalone use. We do not believe that that's, land in Richfield is such a precious commodity. We've been fully developed for over 50 years now. And so vacant land is a rarity, and we just do not believe that's the most efficient and highest and best use of our vacant land. We're also concerned about the interest in surface parking. In my time at the city of Richfield, we regularly receive calls because of our proximity to the airport for surface parking for airport shuttle services. And now with the advent of Uber and Lyft and those kinds of rideshare services, oftentimes they're looking for a place to stage cars. Again, I don't feel like cars as a primary use is a good use of property. So with that, unless Melissa has anything to add, I think we would just go through this direction needed. And maybe I can just read through this quickly. So the the question is whether you agree with us on whether standalone parking would be a desired land use in the community. I told you my opinion, but I don't vote. My opinion is just that. Your opinion is legislation in our community. So whether you believe that's a use you'd like to see in the community, and if so, is this site a good site for off-site parking or standalone parking? And then again, if both of those things are true, then should staff explore selling the property and going through the necessary planning and zoning changes that would be required? And then finally, as Ms. Paleman and Mr. Carter both mentioned, the existing approvals for Richfield Bloomington Honda requires the, I don't know if requires is the right word, but it stipulates the building of a ramp on the existing property, and whether staff and the applicant should explore modifying the agreement in some way to change that requirement. So with that, I would stand for any questions you might have, as with the applicant and Ms. Paleman. Thank you.
So at this point, it is difficult to see everyone, and I have one other question about our new platform. There are 2 people that are listed as attendees. Are they allowed to put anything in the chat box? So that they can contribute?
I don't know. I would ask them to give it a try, and let's see, because as I said, this is a new venue for us. So if I believe Mr. Lavin, Commissioner Lavin, if he could try sending us a chat and seeing if we receive that.
Okay, and then if you would like to ask a question, if you can just give us a heads up in the chat, since we can't see everybody, and it looks like Councilmember Troutman would like to ask a question, so we'll go ahead and let him have the floor.
Thanks, Chair Supple. I just had a quick practical question with regards to the moratorium on parking in the corridor. Would we be able to grant an individual variance to the moratorium, or would it require opening the door to multiple multiple expanded uses in the area?
Trauman, it's not a moratorium. We just don't permit it. That's just a terminology thing, but we would not be able to grant a variance because that would be considered a use variance, and use variances are not legal. So we would have to make an actual change to the ordinance to allow this, and then it would apply to all properties in that particular zoning district.
Thank you. And then could you remind, how big is that zoning district?
I'm not sure I understand the question. There are several different zoning districts within the 494 corridor. This particular property is zoned mixed use neighborhood. So if you were going to apply it to all properties in mixed use neighborhood, I don't have an acreage, but you would have other options. You could decide that you want to allow it in the C2 general commercial district, or you want to allow it in the mixed use community district. Or you could apply an overlay and say you want to allow it in the 494 corridor. Those would be options.
Maybe I'm not asking it well. I was just wondering how broad or how narrow would the exception be? Could we address just this property, or would we have to open it up to all the properties in the corridor?
You would have to be open to all properties that are in the same zoning district.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can give just a little bit of background on the ramp that was anticipated or required. Was it explicitly required? Is the city penalizing RB Honda in some way for not building it, or is this just like at the time they thought they would build this?
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, it is required. There is a stipulation in the approved planned unit development that requires the applicant to meet with staff on an annual basis to discuss progress toward constructing the ramp. Construction of the ramp would have brought them to near compliance with the minimum building coverage for this district. And then the ramp was to be under construction by 2020. So as of right now, the property is non-compliant with those approvals. Staff has not brought any enforcement action against the process, though. We have discussed the possibility of requesting an amendment or coming to the council to talk about that non-compliance issue.
And then just a general question, a ramp would be a higher tax value than a surface parking lot, correct? Like it would generate more tax base?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Okay, so, I mean, I think it's clear what my opinion is from the question, but if we sold this to be a surface parking lot that replaces a ramp that would otherwise be built, we would be both losing a site and get less tax base than if we were to just do what we previously agreed to do. So that troubles me. I don't see what this proposal really offers the city. I think Honda's a great employer. I'm glad to have them here. And they've done a lot of good things with that building, but this was a commitment to the community. It seems like they still need it because they don't have enough parking on site. And mostly it's just this land is limited. It's one of our more valuable areas of land along 494 because it has that freeway access and frontage. And I think so for most cases, standalone parking lots are not helpful. I can imagine some very rare cases like city-built district parking or something, but this is nothing like that. I certainly don't want to see a bunch of airport parking lots in our community. And I was just, clicking around, sort of seeing what different tax, what different things are taxed at or what they're valued at. So there's a couple other service parking lots in the 494 area, and they pay about $30,000 an acre in total tax per year. And if you compare that to like the Henley, a relatively compact new apartment building, it's $123,000 an acre. Even New Orleans Court, an affordable older apartment building, pays $66,000 an acre. So we're not getting housing, we're not getting tax base, and we're losing tax base on the Honda property. I understand why it's advantageous for their business, and I think as a businessman, Mr. Carter is right to make the pitch. But as a policymaker, I see no benefit in it for the city.
Are there others that wish to weigh in? Otherwise, I have a question for Mr. Carter. Did anyone else have any questions before I ask mine? Okay, so I'm curious, Mr. Carter, as to why you said there were reasons you didn't do the parking ramp. If you could share those with us, that would be helpful. Thank you.
With everything that you guys are saying, the reason why I didn't, and Melissa and John are pretty clear, so is the mayor, that when I agreed in principle to do that back when the building was being built, the building wasn't built yet. And my tax base on my old property was $330,000. It skyrocketed by the time everything got said and done to $1.3 million. I'm paying a little over $100,000 or $97,305 a month in taxes. And that was not in my budget. That was not in anywhere near my expected budget. The dealers down the street, I don't think, are anywhere close to that. So the problem lays, I think, partly in because I built such a nice building. This is quite arguably the nicest Honda dealership in the country from a cost per square foot standpoint. It is just a very high-end Honda building. 3 stories raised the cost because of the size that we needed. That expanded during the process. And by the time I got to paying all the bills, 1.3 million, I explained to Melissa and John, was like as if I built a reasonably sized building like the other dealers in town built, plus a full parking ramp in the beginning, I'd be paying the city of Richfield about the same amount of taxes I'm paying right now. So with that, I can't afford from a bottom line build up standpoint. I was losing money in my first ramp up to this, and I'm just getting to the point where I'm getting my nose above water, and then COVID hits. And then I went from 197 people down to 60 people, and was able to build back up before the second wave of COVID. And then I had to let a lot of those people go again. And then I'm recovering now. I'm back up to about 125 people from 197. So this building cost $36 million to build. There's 2 other Honda stores that were built within a year of mine with basically the same interior square footage as mine, except they were built on 1 story for $18 million. I'm paying $50,000 a month more in tax than the average Honda dealer in town with me and the average. So you are getting your money that you would have got in the first place if we'd have done it in a responsible way, is the way I'm looking at it. And at this point of building up my operation to get bottom line revenue to pay for this place, if I take and tie up that lot where we would build on my site right now that they're talking about and remove all of my inventory, which is used, for approximately 1 year to build that, it would destroy my business. I would literally go under the way I look at the dollars and cents of this thing with the tax requirement and the rent requirement, which is $235,000 a month. So I asked for partnership in the city to say, look, I built you a premier business in town. I draw in tax money, I draw in business, I draw in consumers to do business other than mine in town. I'm a regional business, not a local business, and I have a major impact from a financial standpoint, and I'm going to continue to grow. This in the long term, this is going to be a very good investment. That $36 million will pay for itself by far over, but I'm 6 years into it at this stage. I can't knock a year out in my building, especially coming out of COVID right now. It's critical that I can't build that on my spot right now. I would like to buy this city ramp or this city parking lot right now as a temporary for that growth. And then I don't see why I can't approach some of the other businesses to acquire the rest of that may potentially that public storage unit is kind of an old antiquated piece compared to the ones across the street with the same flag out front. As people do that all the time. I acquired other businesses to build this store that you're seeing right now in development. And if I could do that, then I could build long-term a ramp and a business, probably extended service operations over there, and then everything would fit the comp plan as it would be, because I'd have an operating business on with the parking as well. So I'm here for the long term. This is not just a short-term thing. We have the wherewithal to make this thing work, and I was just asking the city for partnership, and that's just this little piece is just a small strategic step in the long-term partnership between you and me and the city.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Executive Director Stark, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just want to make a couple of points. I talked about the staff's opposition, and I just want to make it crystal clear. Staff is opposed to standalone parking as a use. We are absolutely supportive of Richfield Bloomington Honda and their place in the community. We love working with Tim and his staff. So again, I just want to make that point clear that this is about the use of standalone parking, not about Richfield Bloomington Honda. Secondly, on the taxes, and Mr. Carter and I have had conversations on and off over the last couple of years about taxes, and this is maybe for people watching as well. The city has no role in setting the tax value. That's all done by Hennepin County, and sometimes we agree with what Hennepin County values something at. Sometimes we don't, but we really don't. We don't really have a role in doing so. And there's a third point that's eluding me right now. So if it comes back to me, I'll let you know.
All right, are there additional questions or comments? I am interested in knowing, I don't like the idea of surface parking, so I don't want to go that route. But the last question that you were asking us to talk about the approvals for the required parking ramp, is there a way to do like an extension or something to give Mr. Carter time to negotiate with green businesses or something along those routes? Or is that not possible? Because I don't think I want to go down the road of opening Ridgefield up to a lot of standalone parking. But if we can work some way to make it feasible to do the ramp in the future, is that possible?
Yes, and we have talked on and off again with Mr. Carter about that. You know, he one of his concerns is, I believe, what to do with his inventory while the parking ramp is under construction. And certainly this site it could accommodate some of that inventory, and we would be happy if it's available to continue to working with him to temporarily use the site for his inventory so that that frees up space on his current site. You know, we would also be willing to explore whether there are any economic development tools or sources that would help with the costs of the ramp. So those are two possible solutions.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? Go ahead, Assistant Community Development Director Palman.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I just wanted to add that you asked about time and giving an extension, and there certainly could be an amendment to those approvals to perhaps bring Honda out of non-compliance now and extend the deadline for construction or explore other options there. Those could be amended.
Thank you. Thank you. Oops, Commissioner Sandal, I believe you had your hand up. Thank you.
Okay. I can appreciate Mr. Carter's wanting to solve his parking problem, and I would certainly concur for a short term or until something else may come along that he would be allowed to continue to do what he's been doing for his employees. I don't know if we have anything that's an immediate project that's being proposed. And I certainly would be supportive of giving him an extension. We have all sorts of people who are not paying rent and living in apartments because we have a COVID crisis. And I certainly understand that people aren't necessarily out there buying cars when they don't know if they can pay their rent. So I don't have any problem also with granting an extension for the building of the, considering that the last 2 years haven't been the greatest economically for anybody. And I do want to say that Mr. Carter has been an excellent partner with the city on any number of issues. I know he's serviced a lot of clubs and organizations before the COVID hit in terms of providing meeting space and working with the community in all sorts of positive ways and serving on our transportation commission, among others. So he is to be commended for that. And I would hope that the city will do whatever it can to help him continue to be a strong community and business leader in the community.
Are there other commissioners or council members that wish to speak? All right, go ahead. Chair Quam, go ahead.
Just briefly, Melissa, you said that some of the surrounding areas would have to be changed in the comp plan too, to match this. And I was just wondering which, and what are they now and how big of an area you're talking about? And then I'm a little confused on if we did go for this idea, would that thereby have to open up standalone parking in the future? So that makes a big difference, I think, for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Quam. Yes, so if we were going to look at changing the designation of this particular property from housing, we would also want to look at the adjacent parcels. If we're going to build allow a surface parking to be built here, perhaps residential immediately next to that isn't the right use, then we'd maybe look at expanding commercial or mixed use throughout that entire area. We just have to look at how the uses work together and play off of each other. So right now, I think I don't have the map up in front of me anymore, but on the, let's see if I can see it. There were an entire section, the next block was guided for high density residential, and also the entire bottom half of south half of this block. So about 2 full city blocks, we'd really need to take a look at and see if that still made sense as a designation. And then in terms of the zoning, there really is not a way to allow a surface parking lot on one parcel and not extend it to other parcels. In order to do so, you would essentially have to create a zoning district of one piece of land. And I don't actually know that that's legal, not legal. So we would have to decide that this was appropriate in more places than just this one parcel.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, we could talk obviously more with our city attorney on this topic, but my understanding is, as Assistant Director Pellman said, you really can't have a zoning district of one property. That constitutes what's known as spot zoning, which is not a legal land use pattern. And really, anything you do to zero in, I'm being a little facetious here, but if you said, well, anywhere in the mixed use district that's south of a street with 7 in it and east of a street named Pleasant, I mean, anything you did that really zoned in on a particular piece of property would still fall in that spot zoning category, which is not a legal land use tool.
What if you condition it on the business being adjacent, or is that not? No?
Yeah, no, I think that's possible. We have talked about that. One of the problems is with those adjacencies and abutting properties, we'd have to look at how our code treats streets. So if it was across the street, is it measured one way versus if it's directly abutting, it's another? Because again, Trunk Highway 77 is across the street from the airport. And so in that context, surface parking would be adjacent to the primary use.
Thank you, Executive Director Stark. I have a written statement here from Councilmember Whalen, and then I know Commissioner Vreese Daniels wanted to speak, and I wanted to clarify with, now I'm blanking out with Ms. Dubois about, I'm blanking out on your title and I apologize. Did the comment that you received, did that Commissioner want that read as well?
Yes, Chair Supple, Commissioner Lavin did want to supply that comment for reading.
Okay, so I'll start off with Mr. Whalen, then we'll go to Commissioner Vreese Daniels, and then if you want to read the comment from Commissioner Lavin, that would be great. So this is from Councilmember Whalen. He said that he is opposed to a parking lot on this site and doesn't think that any more staff or council time should be given to this proposal. Parking lots are not an allowed use anywhere in the city, which he thinks is the right approach and should not be changed. Also, parking is not the best use for this site, even if we did allow it. And he supports the efforts underway to find a better use for that site. And that was from Councilmember Whalen. All right, and then I'll open the floor to Commissioner Vreese Daniels.
Thank you. I just want to give my 2 cents as well, that I don't feel like this is a good use of space for parking, and would love for us to continue to research and search for housing opportunities here that fit the goals of the HRA. Thank you.
All right, so if you would go ahead and read the comments from Commissioner Lavin, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. Commissioner Lavin stated that his thoughts in general, that he's not excited about a parking lot and feels putting market or affordable on what is arguably the worst lot in the city from a location, safety, surrounding commercial perspective is not attractive either. This lot is begging for a viable commercial use, not at all supportive of current medium density zoning designation. And that was his statement.
Thank you, Administrative Assistant Dubois. Are there other comments? All right, go ahead, Commissioner Rudolph.
I'm not sure what the right solution is. I'm not crazy about surface parking, but I do think, you know, we all know that Honda has been a great partner within this city for a while, and we've gone and bent over backwards for new development over the years recently. You know, whether it's Chamberlain or new development and things like that, where they haven't completely maybe gone through their promises, but you know, they've been a great partner to this city, and I think we should do what we can to try to figure out a solution though. Whether, you know, whether this is the right thing or not, I think we need to work with them pretty hard to work out a solution. You know, COVID has impacted not, you know, all of us, you know, and you know, I can completely understand that.
Thank you, Commissioner Rudolph. Are there other comments? Checking the chat to see if anyone else wanted to say anything. All right. Oh, there we go. Commissioner or Mayor Regan Gonzalez.
Thank you. And then I did see Commissioner Strusa and then Director Stark too had their hands up at a point. I absolutely agree with the comments about the Honda dealer and Mr. Carter being great partners to our community for many, many years. And Commissioner Rudolph's point to really do everything that we can to work with Honda on this site. And I don't think, I am not in support of that answer being surface parking, but I did hear from staff that there was a lot of other options around economic development tools, continued use of the property currently, and looking at the extension of the compliance with the ramp now. I would love to be able to support the surface parking for the site if I was just focused on making that decision based on what was best for a great employer in our city. But given where we're located in the region, so close to the airport, and the implications that it would have on other properties, especially around allowing surface parking in other areas, to me is much too high of a risk to take for that. So just to clarify, I'm not in support of the surface parking proposal, and really do want to see as much as possible ways, you know, if there are tools to support the issue, because the issue that Mr. Carter has will continue to be an issue, and finding ways that we can partner with him to get him to that other side of where he can expand and grow his business, purchase the adjacent property, and continue to be such a great partner here and an employer in our city.
Thank you. Commissioner Sturza.
I would just echo previous comments that I don't think standalone parking is a desired land use for our city, but that I would strongly support other ways of partnering with Honda, whether that's extending the requirements for the parking ramp or looking at other EDA tools or whatever the mode is, but the continued partnership I think is important. But I don't think that standalone parking is good for our community.
Thank you. And then I believe Executive Director Stark had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the comments made by Commissioner Lavin, since he's not really able to participate. You know, staff does recognize that I don't think anybody would call this a perfect housing site. I think it's at best a good housing site. There are some challenges with the site, and so I think, like I said, I just want to acknowledge that that's something we're going to have to work through with any proposal. is how to allow a use there that mitigates some of the negative impacts of the adjacent land uses, the railroad tracks, some of those other uses. So that will be a challenge.
Thank you. Is there any final input that anyone would like to make? And please speak up because I can't see everybody if you're raising your hand. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? All right, hearing none, I want to ask staff if you have enough input to move forward now.
We do, and I think, you know, for Mr. Carter to proceed with a site plan, he'd really need to start spending some more money, you know, on architecture and engineering, those kinds of things. So to some extent, it's, you know, whether he's heard enough to make an educated decision about whether to make that investment and to go down that road. But for my part, I do think we hear where the policymakers are coming from, and you know, I'd welcome a call from Mr. Carter, and he and I can hook up and talk about whether they're. And I'd mentioned EDA resources. I don't know what those might be, but I'm certainly willing to put effort into exploring those with Mr. Carter and seeing if there's what he would need to overcome in order to build the ramp on his site and how we could be helpful in doing so.
All right, well, I want to also thank Mr. Carter for all that you've done for the city of Richfield and for taking the time to come forward and speak with us. I'm going to offer one last chance if there's anyone that wants to say anything before we adjourn. All right, well, thank you for.
Can I say something?
Oh, go ahead, Chair Kwon.
I just think I feel undecided. I don't feel like I quite have enough analysis of the situation other than if this would open it up to standalone other parking other places and we couldn't make it conditional on, you know, a business being adjacent, then I would be not in favor. I'm not one of the 4 out of 5 voting, but I'm not. I don't feel like I know enough to be against the idea yet. I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts? All right, well then I'm hoping that we can work together and partner with Mr. Carter and the city and come up with a solution. Thank you all for your time, and we will stand adjourned.